Hello, it's Ian's POV, and I'm obviously Ian. Now, Starmer is giving me so much stuff to talk about. It's just unbelievable. Now, I've never known a Prime Minister that I cannot recognise as a Prime Minister. I've got no confidence in him. If he does anything, it's going to be a disaster. He said he's wants a ceasefire. Sorry, I got an itch. Anyway, that fell down in the first night, but he still tried to take credit for it in the morning. So the peace talks were today. Or yesterday, I should say Saturday. It's now Sunday. The peace talks between Iran and America were in Pakistan. And it's fallen through. There is no peace deal. I didn't think there would be. I don't think Iran wants a peace deal, because that would mean they would have to step down as part of what the Americans want. They want the IRGC to step down, to have an interim government. They want the Afghan army to take control, so there's not a vacuum. And they want independent elections. Because the IRGC is a minority. They're an occupying force of Arabs. Now, Starmer's trying to take the high ground. He's trying to be the world statesman. And it is not working. But he's being backed up by Canada and Australia because they've got socialist governments like we have. But what's happened is Starmer has got over 400 MPs. You know, he'd get anything through Parliament if he wanted to. But they are absolutely spellbound. And it's like they got blinkers on. Now, in politics, under Maggie Thatcher and Tony Blair, going back to Heath and Wilson, although they were right and left, you know, socialist and Tory, they tried to take the middle ground. They didn't want to sound the Labour didn't want to sound too socialist, and the Tories didn't want to sound too conservative. So you had both parties were trying to take the middle ground. Because that's where most of us live, is in the middle ground. I'm not far right. I'm politically independent. I got to admit, I'm supporting reform at the moment. But what's happened is the goalposts have moved. And what's happened is the Labour Party have gone socialist. They've gone communist. They've brought in net zero. They want DEI, diversity. They think that men can be women. And it's not about equality. It's about putting people who are different, giving them more rights than ordinary people. That's socialism. They did a test in America. They were studying schools that were woke and schools that were conservative. And one of the socialist things was nobody will fail. So they got the kids. Now you've got the kids that were A students, and they work their butts out. And then you've got the kids that hardly work at all and don't get very many points. Anyway, the kids that didn't get very many points, they upped. And the kids that worked hard and got A's got B's. So they leveled the playing field. The lower people, the not so well educated people, were elevated. And the educated kids were downgraded. So you had a wider belt in the middle. People weren't allowed to excel. So this went on for 5 years, this study. Kids who worked hard and were A then didn't bother to work because they knew they were going to get the same grade anyway. And kids that didn't work anyway because they were going to get a grade harder than they were working. This is how socialism works. And after 5 years, they were all mediocre and nobody shone. The brighter kids were dumbed down and the dumber kids were left to be dumb. It's not an expression I like to use, but it's the only way I can explain it. Now, kids that aren't very bright academically have skills that you don't see. Kids that are dyslexic doesn't make them thick. I was a director of a charity that dealt with kids with learning difficulties. And there was a number of us that were the directors. I've got to admit, I didn't do a lot, but they needed figure out because we were going to try and get government money to fund research. It fell through. I was a director for 4 years, but they had an Italian doctor, an American doctor, who was also a qualified teacher. And they worked together and they would look at kids with disabilities and give the parents programs. And what they said they were doing was reprogramming the brain. You've got neural pathways. And this is the way that it was explained to me. Obviously, it's a lot more scientific than I can explain it. But it's like stroke victims. When they teach stroke victims to walk again and to talk again. What they try and do is rewire the neural pathways. And that's done by repetition. Either physiotherapy, walking, playing. Computer games are a good one for them because it's hand-eye coordination. And the doctor that was the teacher used to love computer games. And he tried to find the best computer games that the kids could use to help retune the neural pathways. And he found that kids with learning difficulties had skills that were not obvious. He said that there was a study by the American Army, and they found the dyslexic kids that join the Army make good gunsmiths, they make good mechanics, they understand machinery, they understand how things work. Some kids are absolutely brilliant at maths. And I mean genius maths. But because they're dyslexic and can't read very well, they're put in the lower classes. And they're saying, no, this is wrong. Everybody should be trained to their best ability, not what you see on the surface. Now, what's happening now is we haven't got people who are trained. I'm not talking about disability. I'm talking about everybody. the schools, the colleges, universities over the last 30, 40 years. Education has been dumbed down. There was a book called Dumbing Down America. That was about its education system. But it was happening here too. When I started school, when I was 11, 1967, Beatles were doing Sergeant Pepper. I remember it well. Anyway, not a story. And when I started, the first 2 years, we had separated classes. So we had maths, English, chemistry, biology, physics for the first 2 years. And then the idea was that you would then specialise. I did woodwork and metalwork as my specialist subjects when I was in the 3rd year. But what they did was they combined history and sciences into something called humanities. So it was geography, history, science, and it was all bolted into one. So your education on everything was dumbed down. You weren't educated in one subject. And they had a science thing that was human biology, chemistry and biology and physics as one as well. And you could pick one or the other. And that was dumbing down education. I didn't realise it at the time. And obviously there was art classes and language classes. I was never any good at languages. And I'm still not very good at languages. I can only just about manage English. French, German, I did it in the first 2 years. Come the 3rd year, they said, well, we don't think languages are going to be for you, Ian. And they were right. I was hopeless at it. I couldn't retain it. But when it came to woodwork and metalwork, I did better. I was an A student in that. And I also did technical drawing. Drawing metal bits and buildings and all sorts of things. And that's just stayed me in good stead over the years. And then when I left school, I went to college. And I repaired antique furniture. I was in a gun shop. They wanted metal and wood course. And there was a furniture craft course in Bower Ashton in Bristol. And they taught upholstery, wood finishing and metal finishing. And that stayed me in good stead over the years as well. But I've noticed that the education is dumbing down. Kids out of university, they don't learn Latin and Greek and all the classics anymore. They don't learn history. They don't learn about the kings. One of the things I found that I needed to learn, that I learnt on my own, was dates and kings and a timeline. So if I wanted to know when Queen Anne was, it's round about 1710. Henry VIII, middle of the 1500s, 1530, 1550, something like that. Then you had Queen Elizabeth. You had Queen Mary in between mine. And the timeline, in my gun history, I do a talk on the history of firearms and the gun trade within Britain and the trades. Under Henry VIII, we almost lost the ability to make firearms. Now, this is where I'm going. The Huguenots came over from Holland. They were Protestants. We gave them asylum, and they used to make arquebuses, matchlocks, and they were held in the Tower of London, not in the dungeons, in the workshops. But over the years, they died out. And the franchise for firearms was given to a family in London. Can't remember the name, I got it written down. But they all died in a plague or something. So there wasn't people who could make guns. So they then let it out to everybody could make guns. But there were some bodgers out there, and they weren't making guns very badly. So in the 1600s, they put in a proof act, gun barrel proof act, and every gun that was made in Britain had to go to the proof house, which was London. The Birmingham proof house, which I go to, didn't start till 1830, when we were fighting Napoleon. Because the gun trade was centred around Birmingham and London. And they didn't want to keep taking it to London and back. So they built their own second proof house. Now, what I'm trying to get at is people excelled at things. And they allowed the people who could do things to do it. Because the country needed it. In time of peace and in time of war. Today, everybody's been dumbed down. People, I don't think, are as educated as I was when I was a kid. And I've learnt things over the years myself. Now, I'm not saying there aren't bright people out there. There are some really smart people. But there ain't very many. And the general education of people has gone down. Now, what we've got now is where I'm trying to get to. The point I'm trying to make is these people are now in power of this education system that dumbed people down. With DEI on top of it, doesn't help. So we've got a front bench of politicians that don't come across as being very smart. I keep saying they look like DEI hire. I think Starmer is a lawyer, supposed to be educated. But I can't see any evidence of that. He says one thing, does another thing, and then says something completely different. He says what he thinks we want to hear. He's trying to stay in power. He's trying to get the Labour vote in May. And that's his blinkers. That's all he thinks about. We know the Navy is in such a state that this morning on Talk TV, they were talking about the British Navy going to the French and asking the French to patrol our waters because we got no ships available. We can't even defend or patrol our own waters. This, I believe, is a result of education over the last 30, 40 years. It's been dumbed down. And now the people in charge are a result of that, and you can see it. They ain't very bright. You look at the Labour front bench when it sat there at parliamentary question time. Would you give any of them a job? I wouldn't. They look like a bunch of DEI hires, don't they? Now, we can't defend our own waters. We haven't got a ship that could go to Cyprus and defend against the drones and the missiles from Iran. We're dependent on the Italians, the Greeks, and the French. We now can't patrol our own waters. I think the Defence Secretary should resign on the spot. I think Starmer should call a general election for May and let the people decide, because we now know what they're up to and how good they are, and we don't like it. Anyway, this is Ian. Sorry it was a long-winded one, but I was trying to prove my point. I waffle on a bit, I know, but there you go. Anyway, Ian's POV. Bye-bye for now.